if we're going back to the principles that made America great, one of which being that the person is the highest form of creation, and that there is no elite. There is no elite. There is only merit. And if you're going back to that, and if you're going back to risk taking, entrepreneurship, free markets, and letting the people decide, then there is no way that this institution in its current format keeps the same amount of power that it retains, especially not under a president that is his entire game theory is that if he says something in public, then he can never go back on his word. If he said something in public, it's either him winning, meaning the president, the chief executive of the United States, or a bureaucrat. So you tell me, do you think that he's going to go back on his word? No. He's going to do anything possible to win, and he will win because that is his entire game theory. That's why he went to the Fed to visit them about coding violations and over budget renovations.
Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Lior Gantz. He's the founder and CEO of Wealth Research Group. Welcome back to the channel, Lior.
Thanks for having me back.
Great. I wanted to start off with gold, the Trump administration, and the Fed, mainly because I've just seen a post on X today, and I'll share it with you. The article, and I think it's really significant. This came out August 1st, so this is from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors of Federal Reserve System, and even they, Lior, are talking about revaluation and revaluation of gold. And I thought that was very significant. I hadn't seen that when they published it a few days ago, but people are bringing it up today. As you can see here, it says with public debt at high levels, some governments have begun to explore financing additional expenditures without raising taxes while also not increasing public debt outstanding. And it says one possibility is using proceeds from valuations on gold reserves, as has been floated in the US and Belgium recently. I'm not sure what they mean by Belgium, but
The EU.
yeah, the EU, I guess. Yeah, I think this is quite explosive, and they go through places where they've done this before, like in Italy, in the Caribbean here, Lebanon, South Africa, and even in Germany. So they go through all of it, and that's it. They don't really give an opinion whether the U.S. should be doing it, but I thought it was significant that they're talking about it. So what do you think?
Well, first of all, the gold is right now valued at at mark to market of 40, 50 years ago. So obviously, putting it mark to market to right now would be the easiest slam dunk that the U.S. government could do. This is not owned by the Fed, by the way. This is owned by the U.S. government. So it's owned by the people, and not by the Federal Reserve System in the United States. But yes, if all accounted for, if I'm not mistaken, the value would be around $700 billion today. So it's not something that it has explosive value in terms of changing anything significant, but it's the easiest thing to do, and it's a slam dunk, right? So I would say that's definitely one thing that's happening. A second thing that you may have not seen, but I would definitely research is that 5 states are already trying to make gold money again in the United States. This is Arkansas and Tennessee and Texas and Florida, and I forget the fifth. But one thing you can see is that there is a significant movement in the United States right now and elsewhere to make gold and silver relevant again And this is not just because of conservatism coming back in America, but also because there's a layer of fintech on top of it with the three legislation that just passed in the United States with the Genius Act, the Clarity Act, and the Anti-CBDC Act. This explodes a whole new wave of fintech onto the global scene. And these stable coins, not only can they be backed 100% by gold, I'm sorry, by the dollar, but they can also be 100% backed by gold. And you can also start to see where you pay or receive payment and you ask to get it as a fractional ounce of silver or gold. And it will have to be it will have to be allowed. So we are seeing the free market coming back and asserting what is money, and that's the biggest thing that we're seeing across the world because the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency, it's going to stay that way. There is no other country that wants the burden or the responsibility or has the capability of becoming the reserve currency, nor can a basket of currencies right now replace the US dollar. It is simply the best fiat currency. And it represents the best economy but what it does not represent is the world we live in. Right now, 60% of global trade is transacted between governments in US dollars. And that is a trend that is in decline. It has already peaked 22 years ago and it's in rapid decline. And I think that in the next decade and a half, it's going to go down towards comparatively the size of the U.S. economy. Now, right now, it's a quarter of the global GDP, and I believe it will be between 3/10 and 1/3 of global GDP by 2035 or 2040. So that's a significant decline in the demand for dollars across the world. That means that foreign governments are going to continue to sell US dollars and not come to the bids and the auctions. And that means that you'd have to see an aggregate of what it does because it's going to create a lot of supply of dollars. But at the same time, the US government itself is going to be looking for ways to extinguish debt and to raise revenues, one via tariffs and two via the sovereign wealth fund, which is going to become one of the biggest, if not the biggest, sovereign wealth fund in the world. So there's a lot of changes that are happening, and all of them are saying this era of fantasy that we've been living in for the last 50 years, and especially since the mid 1990s when the Soviet Union fell and dollars just became this debt that never has to be addressed. It's over. And that is the big takeaway from what's happening both in the Fed and obviously in government and in the free markets where it matters most.
Yeah, I recently spoke about this as well, that Trump's tariff policy and the fact that he wants to subtract or decrease the trade and current account deficits a lot, that will mean less demand for dollars from foreigners because they won't be accumulating as many dollar reserves. So it will be a problem for the Treasury debt. And having talked about like a revaluation, potential revaluation, what is there to stop? Let's say if the Treasury and the Fed decide to revalue gold to, let's say, 10,000, because that would add trillions to the Treasury's coffer without any new debt or without having to do any QE for the Fed. And they could pay off, let's say, the debt in the Fed's balance sheet, the debt that the Fed holds. Do you think that's possible too, or they're not going to be as aggressive?
I think that the Fed as an institution is going through a phase where it might not exist in its current form, either by the end of Trump's term or in the next term of a MAGA president, if one is elected in November of 2028, because the Fed, in and of itself, is an institution that is unconstitutional. In the U.S. Constitution, there is no leeway for a central bank, certainly not one that issues currency or creates its own monetary policy and dictates it to the government. To Trump, there is a bureaucrat, a banker, that sits between him and the will of the people and what the United States is constitutionally born to do. So Janet Yellen, this is pragmatically speaking now, financed the U.S. debt with short-term treasuries during the Biden administration because of inflation. And therefore, $12 trillion, which is a third of the national debt, is coming due the next year. And that's why Trump wants lower interest rates. It's very simple. He needs to finance, or Scott Bessent needs to finance $12 trillion. And every point that is lowered is, you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in yearly expenses for the American taxpayer and their the next generation and the next generation. And what Trump is saying, look, if we had a free market of interest rates, the U.S. interest rates, the U.S. government's interest rate would be one of the lowest, if not the lowest in the world. And he's right. If you have no central banks and you have the free markets dictating interest rates for government, the U.S. government would have the lowest interest rate. There would be probably 2 or 3 or 4 small countries that are that have more stable economies in terms of the debt to GDP ratio, etc. But from the large economies, there is no doubt the U.S. has the best economy, and therefore that's basically his point. He's saying, how am I beholden to a bureaucrat that sits there and figures interest rates? And the bigger question that Trump is floating through the media to the people is, how is it that we have 50 states, very different economies throughout these 50 states, and we have a national mortgage average? How come there's a housing boom in one state, there's a housing slump in another, and there is no competitive interest rates between them for mortgages, for housing, for bank loans, for business loans, for infrastructure, etc., etc.? What he wants, effectively, is to dissolve the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, to him, is a sin born in 1913 from a reformist president, Woodrow Wilson. And if you understand the Trump doctrine, the Trump doctrine is to go back to 1901, when the first reformist president came along and started to say that, hey, this Constitution is 140 years old, it's outdated, it's not for our world in 1901, this amazing world that we have, we need to reform it. And from that president on, you have had a series of presidents for 120 years who have taken the U.S. Construct and the Constitution and have morphed it into a nanny state and something altogether different than the founding documents and the way that America was governed and the power that these documents give to the people. If you go back before 1901, which is what Trump is doing with tariffs, those are from the golden age of America between the 1870s and the early 1900s. If you go back to all of the special rules and regulations that he's putting together, he's invoking rules and regulations from 100 plus years ago. And all of this statism that has been born in 3 waves. The first wave was Woodrow Wilson. The second was FDR, which basically America is living under the FDR rules right now. The third was Lyndon Johnson. Those were the 3 big waves of socializing and socialism in America. And after 2008, you basically saw anti-American presidents with Obama and Biden. Now you are going back to America becoming a sovereign country. And for it to be a sovereign country that runs its own policies, it has to act as a sovereign nation. And it's departing itself from this idea of the collective West. And it's saying, look, if you have merit, if you are a citizen of a country that is willing to defend your country, if you're willing to defend the country that you live in, if you believe in the country that you live in, then you will survive in the 21st century. And if you're not, then you don't have any right to exist. We, the American public, will not finance or defend your country. We are not part of this global alliance of countries. Only countries that have merit are willing to defend themselves. The people are proud of their country. The people are having children. Their family formation is above the replacement of 2.1 per family. Have any standing in the 21st century. And if you can't accept that, you won't be part of the 21st century as your current form, because there is the threat that the Chinese and their allies will take over. That is a real threat to the United States and to the West. And that is really the key point of this presidency and going forward. This idea that the West was very close and the United States was very close to not having a real country. This is not my words. This is Elon Musk's words. Okay, this is the smartest, most successful businessman ever. And he said if Kamala Harris had won, you would not have had a country. And the reason he was saying that is because the citizens of the United States do not understand now they're forming documents. And they effectively are Americans by citizenship, but not by spirit. And Donald Trump is bringing back that education, that spirit. And the voter wanted that, obviously. And that means that the West, as this collective globalized whole, and especially this weird fantasy that the West can merge with countries that are authoritarian and have some sort of a common ground of appeasement, is all wrong. And that's the world we are moving into. In that world, the dollar remains the strongest fiat currency, but not in its current form. And if you're looking at the way that the economies would run, the race is about supply chains and trade routes. And that's everything that you're seeing. Right now, two presidents are headed, two heads of states are headed to the White House, Azerbaijan and Armenia. Why, I'm sorry, Georgia and Armenia. Why has Trump brokered a peace treaty between them? Because that peace treaty is critical to the north to west, to the north to south Belt and Road Initiative of the Russians that tried to merge Russia with the Med through Syria. And that is coming undone right now. Then you have the east to west Belt and Road Initiative that the Chinese are building, and other Belt and Road Initiatives that they were building in Panama and otherwise. It's all about supply chains. It's all about trade routes, and countries that will not wake up and defend themselves, like NATO is doing right now, will not exist in 20, 30 years. Look, in 1901, there were 50 countries in the world. 50. Okay? This world that we live in, where there's almost 200 countries, that's very unnormal. And the constructs, the borders that we have today are completely arbitrary, and they were all held up by the U.S. Navy patrolling the open oceans and exerting almost hegemonial amount of power in the last 20 years. But since 2011, with the rise of China, this is coming undone. Right now, the United States cannot defend its allies. It just cannot bear that burden. And countries that understand that are arming, they're defending themselves, they're reshaping the way that they are living. And countries that are not are going to be swollen by their neighbors, their stronger neighbors. It's just, that's the way it's going to be. This peace dividend that we've lived in since the 1990s is over.
Yeah, you mentioned the Fed, that Trump wants to basically end the Fed, and I mean, I would be really thrilled if that were to happen. I even have end the Fed mugs.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I didn't see that.
this one has a quote by this is supposed to be Charles Lindbergh. He was a congressman back in 1913, and
I'm
he
aware.
learned about it.
Yes.
You know, and I've heard recently from Kevin Warsh, who's one of the main
Correct.
candidates, that the Fed and the Treasury should merge. Do you think that's part of the plan? Instead of going like at the Fed directly and say, I'm going to close down the Fed, Trump is trying to merge it into the Treasury and then maybe liquidate it.
So, I mean, it's certainly a possibility, which would be much less radical than just abolishing it. We have to understand why there's a central bank in America. In the era after the Civil War, there was a lot of soul searching in America. How do we get to so many casualties? What happened to our country? And what happened was the Ivy League colleges of today, they only went until the first degree. So your Harvard, your Yales, etc. If somebody, an academic, a thought, a scholar, wanted to proceed and learn higher education, he went to Europe. So in the 1870s, 1880s, and 1890s, these scholars, very smart people, academics, they used to go to Europe, to Oxford University and universities in Germany, and learn there the higher education, and then come back to America feeling enlightened and illuminated from what they've learned. And at that time, in the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, Germany was uniting from about 300 separate principalities into this giant state run by a managerial class. And it was working. Science. And it almost felt like there was a way to centrally manage a country to perfection. That was all the rage back in the late 1800s. And these scholars came back to the United States and said, this is what's working in the world today. And look at us. We have just fought a civil war. We need what the Germans have. And that's how the reformist movement, the progressive movement, the statism that you have today, this is America today, is largely based on the German 1880s, 1890s model when it comes to central banking. Because they sent in the early 1900s, there was a big bank run in America, and they sent Nelson Aldrich, who was a congressman, to Europe, and he studied for 2 years their central bank system, came back and advised the Congress, and that's how you had the Federal Reserve formed. This is all a reformist movement that started 100 years ago, and then from there it went, to every which way. So, if you believe like President Trump, that is all wrong, and that you don't need a managerial class, a bureaucrat class of elites that know better than the free markets, which is like literally anti-American, right? Then why have 4,000 or 5,000 employees at the Fed running all of these numbers and figures and economics, and then coming up with this number that fits the entire economy? He literally said that in one of the latest Q&A. He said, look, me and another guy were right. 275 people were wrong, or something to that effect, to say that, look, you need to be a street cat. You need a real person in the real economy to decide that. So why would the United States of America, with its robust 4,000 plus community bank system, they have so many banks at the local level, why would they need somebody in Wall Street deciding for the entire country the appropriate interest rate for 50 different economies? It makes no sense. So, if we're going back to the principles that made America great, one of which being that the person is the highest form of creation, and that there is no elite. There is no elite. There is only merit. And if you're going back to that, and if you're going back to risk taking, entrepreneurship, free markets, and letting the people decide, then there is no way that this institution in its current format keeps the same amount of power that it retains. Especially not under a president that his entire game theory is that if he says something in public, then he can never go back on his word. If he said something in public, it's either him winning, meaning the president, the chief executive of the United States, or a bureaucrat. So you tell me, do you think that he's going to go back on his word? No. He's going to do anything possible to win, and he will win because that is his entire game theory. That's why he went to the Fed to visit them about coding violations and over budget renovations. He's putting any pressure needed in order to help the American people. $12 trillion at 4% interest rates. You can calculate how much that would be in interest payments. And then if you only drop it by a point to three or slash it to two, the difference is enormous. Enormous. Okay?
Yeah,
We're talking about every point is 120 billion a year.
wouldn't it be a gamble though if, let's say, and I'm not against the free market at all, I'm all for it, but let's say they abolish the Fed and they let the markets dictate and decide rates. What if rates went up? That would be a problem, and the debt situation is quite bad still in the U.S.
Well, if free markets had to decide interest rates, interest rate in America would be the lowest. There is so much wealth in America in the private sector, both in equity on homes, on in money market accounts, and in total wealth. The total wealth of the United States is much larger than the national debt. The total household wealth in the United States surpasses even the unpaid for liabilities that go into the Social Security system and to the Medicare, Medicaid into the future. Okay, you're talking over 100 trillion right now, and that's before you unlock oil riches, natural gas, offshore, etc. So you have to understand the current formation in the United States is its lowest potential right now. It's as it deindustrialized, overregulated, overtaxed. It moved away from what works as an economy to what looks good in terms of this politically correct agenda, and that's over. It's not coming back.
Yeah, I mean,
Through
there's a meme. Sorry to interrupt you. There's a
Go
meme
ahead.
that I think it's seen in New York in 1913 or 1910, and it's like there's a lot of hustle and bustle, and it says this was prior to the income tax and the Federal Reserve. So I agree with you. The potential is huge.
Huge.
Yeah, the only problem is I think it's to get to where America needs to go eventually. It's not going to be easy. For example, in terms of the tariffs, yes, they're collecting a lot of tariffs, but that's actually coming from the American people paying a higher price. Do you think eventually these tariffs are going to push American companies to come back to the U.S. and start producing in the U.S. because a lot of these trade and current account deficits are because of big corporations in the U.S. going abroad to get the cheap labor and cheap means of production.
100%. Tariffs are only one part of the of this administration's doctrine. They are going to do deregulation. They are look. At the end of the day, um, tariffs are a wartime tool. Okay, so you have to think about it as a weapon. And what's beautiful about it is it does not cause any casualties. It caused a reformation of the world. There are some countries that could not exist unless they work with the current model. And the current model is the U.S. taxpayer goes into debt in order to finance the growth of other countries, and in the case of China, the growth of their military might. That model is over. There is always a trade-off, right? And so you're saying, hey, the trade-off is we put on these tariffs. All of these companies will pass it on to the consumer. That is true only if that was inside of a laboratory environment. But the government is doing many other things to offset these costs that supposedly tariffs will bring. There are talks about eliminating any capital gains tax on selling your house. There right now in America, the average locked equity in a house, if sold, is between $200,000 and $500,000. That's why housing is at an all-time high right now in America, and affordability is at the lowest it's ever been. It's because the baby boomer generation is just not selling because it knows it's going to get taxed heavily on the capital gains tax. If you can unlock that, okay, if you can give a 1 year exemption, if you can give a 1 year exemption on the first 200,000, etc. There are so many tools that the government has. We are moving from a monetary policy led world, which was the Obama led communism of Bernanke and then Yellen, into a fiscal policy world with the free system. So, in that world, the United States is the most agile country in the world. There has never been any people on the face of the earth ever that are more agile than Americans. You can tell me about your own country. Okay, how long does it take to convince a worker to move from London to the south of England for a better job? He can get back to you in a year and a half. In the United States, people make that kind of choice over a weekend. Okay,
Yeah, that's right.
the U.S. is something that is so unique, and most people today don't understand the true might and the true potential of the United States because they've only seen the United States deindustrialize for the last 30 years. So the real America is coming back, and it's hard to explain it to somebody that hasn't studied the history of the United States thoroughly for 250 years to understand how much potential there is. But you just look around your house and you tell me if there's not one invention that is critical to your life that hasn't been made in the United States. So think about that. Think about like cars and airplanes and electricity, railroads, like anything that you can think of. If it wasn't invented in the United States, it was commercialized and perfected in the United States. So, and the current wave of entrepreneurs that we have is incredible. And I think that you have to realize, tariffs, fine, there might be some inflation short term, but over the long term, there was no income tax before 1916, and there was only tariffs for 140 years, financing the growth of the United States from these 12 measly colonies that started it to becoming the wealthiest and strongest country in the world 140 years later from nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I know the history well as well, and let's hope that this transition is successful. And I think it kind of coincides with the fourth turning, with the big event. Let's end with the markets because the general stock market is at all-time highs, basically. I think Berkshire Hathaway or Warren Buffett, who's retired, they've got 33 or 30% of their assets in cash. Do you think it's a bubble? And how do you see like precious metals and hard assets doing in this new world of real things? I think that's what it is. It's a real economy. Yes, there will always be debt, but it's not built on debt alone. It's built on production. So maybe if you could tell us
Sure.
what you think about
So
that.
if you could go back to April 1st and Liberation Day, this is not how market bubbles look like. So we are not in a market bubble. We are in a change from the Bretton Woods system and then the hyperglobalization system of 1993 until 2020 when COVID hit and changed the way that that America thought about itself. It realized that what it did was become a hostage of the global supply chain. And that's when Trump started to formulate his presidency. So his next term. So what I think your question, markets are not in a bubble. Sure, they are expensive in terms of historical P ratios, etc. But I think the productivity gains that you're about to see from AI will make the market look very cheap in a year from now, and that's what the markets are pricing in: the productivity gains of AI. So that's one thing. There's about 7 trillion in money market accounts that are on the sideline, and I don't think they're coming back at least until interest rates are about 2%. So you have all of this wealth that is on the sidelines. That's not how bubbles look like. When bubbles happen, the retail mania is insane. We're not there. So I think on that part, I'm not worried in the least about a market bubble. On gold and silver, I think that they're both going back to their historical ratios. And therefore, I think that for gold, I anticipate that by the end of the Trump presidency, gold will be 5,000 or higher, and silver will be 100 or higher. Because, again, we have lived in this fantasy world of commodities, and now we're going back to normal.
It's a different view that you have right now to a lot of people because there's a lot of even the MAGA like people are upset with some of the stuff Trump is backtracked on, like all the wars and the Epstein list. So you don't think that's going to affect anything? And
I think that I know you want to wrap this up, so I'll keep it short.
yeah,
I think that in America, just like in many places around the world, there is a class of people that are um, that are sick in the head, and they're both on the right and the left. The left is easy to see; they're insane, and on the right, this is the new insanity. These are people that are isolationists in the United States, for example. They believe, and this is almost it's so childish, but it's popular. They believe that if America just mind its own business and stayed out of everything, that all these other countries that are authoritarian would all of a sudden become unicorns and raise people barefoot in the fields, and everything would be kumbaya. And that's because the last 30 years, these people, these isolationists like Joe Rogan or Tucker Carlson or all these guys that have never seen war, and the only war that they've seen is a crazy fanatic, crazy war like the Bush people led. That's not even a war. It was suicide. It's taking people and sending them to die on something that would never work. They have never seen a smart person prosecute war. And therefore, they deem every war, like Vietnam or like Afghanistan and Iraq, they can't differentiate between what needs to be done and can succeed, and their recency bias, which is that America goes on these insane escapades and always folds. And so to them and to the people that believe in that doctrine, there's nothing I can do. If you think that if China gains access to ports in the Panama Canal, or if Russia advances forces towards the Arctics, or if China gains access to Cuba or Mexico, if this is not a threat to you, then I mean, what can I do for you? You have something wrong with you. America does not isolate. It can never isolate if it wants to retain its global supremacy. If it wants to be a far weaker country where there are interballistic missiles aimed at your big cities like Detroit and Chicago and San Francisco and Los Angeles and Miami and New York and Washington D.C. And if you want submarines docked at Latin American and Central American countries owned by Russia and China, fine, isolate. But unless you want that, yeah, you're gonna get involved. And when I say involved, it doesn't mean that you have to stick your hand in fire. It means that you need a president that knows what he's doing. And but if you have clowns that have zero accountability to the American people and very limited leadership skills like Clinton and Bush and Obama and Biden, then yeah, you're gonna get what you voted for.
Great, Lior. Thank you very much. Can you tell the viewers where they can find your work?
Well, if anybody that listens to this still wants to see more of my views, then you can go to wealthresearchgroup.com. It's a free newsletter that I've been publishing for 9 years. So somebody is interested in these views, and we have done tremendous amount of work both in finance and economy and geopolitics. We're it's a marriage of all of the above.
Great. Thank you, and have a great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.